Show the sword. Behold! The sword of power. Excalibur. Forged when the world was young, and bird and beast and flower were one with man, and death was but a dream. Speak the words.
I love this place!
That is from a movie that is near and dear to my heart, and I suspect many of yours, too. 1981's Excalibur. It's the crowning jewel of director John Boorman, he of Deliverance fame. His tale of King Arthur, from shortly before his birth to his ultimate death, made a huge impact on many of us Gen X gamers. It's not what you might call a strict D&D movie, but I'm actually proud to call it perhaps my favorite fantasy movie. Also one of my favorite movies, period. Boorman's masterpiece isn't dated with flavor of the day, culture filtering through. It's not a political message movie. It simply tells the legend of King Arthur in a surprisingly epic and straightforward fashion, all in just a little over 2 hours. I'm going to give you some of the reasons why you could make the argument that this movie is best in class as far as fantasy movies, with nothing but love and respect to other giants of the genre, of course. Now, the fantasy film genre, at least back then, in its heyday of the 1980s, was mostly meant for men. Even the movies with female heroines needed to appeal to what they knew would probably be at least 80% of their audience, and that would be young men. What I like about Excalibur is that while it's aimed at men, it's not exclusively aimed at young men. As a lad, I loved the movie for the swordplay, Merlin's magic, the round table, and answering the age-old question of whether it's possible to have sex in plate mail armor. The movie answers this with a robust yes, but sadly, Mrs. D hasn't forgiven me for that one time I tried. Because of the scope of this movie and the literary themes it develops, glorious balls-to-the-wall action like you might find in Conan the Barbarian is comparatively tame in Excalibur. Once Arthur has his throne, the movie expertly pivots from action to character-driven drama and intrigue, before coming full circle with a bit of that swordplay at the end. The issues of camaraderie, love, betrayal, forgiveness, loyalty, and sacrifice that erupt in Excalibur don't speak specifically to teenage boys, but these themes certainly do resonate in men who've had the wisdom of a little bit of life experience behind them. Let's just say older. As we know, this kind of movie could not be made in today's climate of humiliating men, white men specifically. In the movie Excalibur, as in all the literary works around King Arthur, a key tenet is him being tragically betrayed by his best friend and wife. Now, a remake of this movie would probably have a never-ending parade of smirking harpies throwing Arthur's humiliation by Guinevere in his face. I'm sure Morgana would now be the sassy sister and made to somehow be the real hero of the movie.
You think you can just waltz in here, make demands, and expect me to fall in line? You've got another thing coming.
And they'd of course have to race swap one of those knights. King Arthur would be going a little too far even for them, so my money would definitely be on Lancelot. Now, a fair time may come again someday that a movie like this could be made, one where directors of true virtue are prepared to put a big goose egg up on that diversity scoreboard and allow only the melanin challenged in their cast. But we are sadly still many, many years away from that, I believe. This is King Arthur distilled in a digestible, visual medium. Some of the Arthurian scholars can't seem to get over the fact that a film and a 1,000-page book are completely different things. Over the years, I've heard many intellectuals smarmily dismiss this movie as a cute little film that looks good at times but packs no serious punch. Pauline Kael, the incredibly elitist and overrated film critic from The New Yorker, at the time had the audacity to say that Excalibur is all images flashing by. We miss the dramatic intensity that we expect these stories to have. Allow me to retort, Miss Kael. After we've been through King Uther's folly, Arthur as a young claimant to the throne, the founding of the Round Table, Camelot at its height, the betrayal by Lancelot and Guinevere, and the Grail quest itself, the movie enters its final act and the twilight of Arthur's reign. It's here where you appreciate that the movie started with Arthur so young as a teenage boy. And by the way, it must be said that Nigel Terry, he had to have made some sort of deal with the devil for this movie. Not only is his acting incredible, he is able to play King Arthur as a teenager all the way to a man at least in his 50s. And he looks believable in every single stage. I know a lot of that is makeup, but it's mostly his performance. It truly is incredible. In the last 20 minutes, the scope of this film finally strikes you. From the time Arthur sips from the Grail cup that Percival gives him, the movie hits you with emotional gut punch after emotional gut punch. First, he rides forth through those cherry blossoms, showing that the land is being renewed along with his spirits. This scene is simple perfection, but it's followed by, for my money, the emotional peak of the movie, and that's when Arthur visits Guinevere at her convent. She has long since taken the cloth since the shame of her betrayal with Lancelot. Here, King and Queen reconcile at last, and you get to see the absolute, undeniable height of Nigel Terry's career. He forgives her, asks for forgiveness himself, and delivers one of the most poignant scenes you're ever likely to see in a period piece.
I've often thought that in the hereafter of our lives, when I owe no more to the future, can be just a man, that we may meet, and you'll come to me, and claim me yours, and know that I am your husband. It is a dream I have.
Yeah, if you don't have a lump in your throat after watching that scene, you probably don't have a pulse. Dramatic intensity indeed, Miss Kael. But as the TV ad man once said, wait, there's more. After seeing his queen one final time, Arthur communes at an ancient pagan stone with his old friend Merlin, long since banished, asking in his dreams for his old friend just to be able to see him go into combat with the sword of power, Excalibur, one final time. He wants to make his tutor proud.
You brought me back. Your love brought me back. Back to where you are now. In the land of dreams.
Are you just a dream, Merlin?
A dream to some.
A nightmare to others! Merlin!
And love indeed brings Merlin back. And that also helps Arthur's cause in the coming battle. For now that his memory has been awakened, Merlin visits his old foe Morgana in her dreams. He tricks her into speaking the charm of making and creating a mist that will only help the outnumbered forces of Arthur. What I also love here is the moment Arthur shares right after this with his adopted brother Kay, who has loyally stood by him all these years. Kay's also visited by Merlin that night, and Merlin tells him that he's going to fight very bravely in the coming battle tomorrow. This is a payoff from earlier in the film when Arthur, as squire to Kay, draws the sword from the stone. And Sir Ector, their father, asks if it's actually Kay who drew the sword from the stone. In a completely understandable moment of confusion and slight jealousy, Kay answers yes, and then immediately remembers his knightly oath and yields the truth. And from there on, he's always at his former squire's side, the most loyal of his knights. During that final battle against Mordred, another account is settled when Lancelot sets aside the cloth and picks up the sword, or mace, one last time, fighting by the side of his old friend and king.
Lancelot! Is it you? Lancelot! Is it true? Oh, it is! Lancelot! Lancelot's with us! He's back!
He only wants to make right now the terrible deed he did. And Arthur chooses forgiveness and love, as he did with Guinevere the night before.
Forgive.
Lancelot,
My salvation is to die a knight of the Round Table.
you are that, and much more. You are its greatest knight. You are what is best in men.
Gee, I wish it all had just a little bit more dramatic intensity. Because we are in the twilight of his reign, we know Arthur's death is coming. Yet it's still jarring when it does come in the movie. In a quick, surprisingly brutal scene, Arthur is run through by Mordred, but he also manages to kill Mordred with Excalibur. Dying there, he asks Percival to give the sword back to the Lady of the Lake for a time when another king will arise at Britain's greatest hour of need. By the way, unknown future king any time now would be just fine. The movie ends with Arthur's body being taken to the Isle of Avalon by the Lady of the Lake, Guinevere, and yes, his own sister, Morgana.
Arthur!
And so ends one of the most incredible fantasy movies that was ever made. Let's compare this to the final 20 minutes of another classic film of the genre, John Milius's Conan the Barbarian. There we're also treated to a great battle towards the end as well. But the theme out of Conan's own mouth is pure revenge. He avenges his family and Valeria at the Mounds in that epic battle. Shortly afterward, he avenges himself by brutally decapitating Thulsa Doom. Great stuff, trust me. I love Conan as much as anyone. But the themes at the end are very close to Howard's source material. Very visceral, very physical, in many ways very basic. The themes in Excalibur's climax mirror the ones found in its source material too, but those are undeniably a little bit more complex. Two very enjoyable movies for very different reasons. Entertainment today is, ironically, so ubiquitous, yet so comparatively shallow and void of this stuff. Nothing seems to hit like these two movies were able to, and from completely different directions. We did not realize how blessed we were to have these things back then. Now I hold on to not just the memory of the movie Excalibur and Conan, but also the impact that those kinds of movies made on me in what is now, I think, undeniably a much fairer time. Now, director John Boorman was originally given the rights to do a version of The Lord of the Rings, if you can believe it or not, back in the early 70s. But that all fell through. So he was able to go back to this project about King Arthur that he had been holding on to for a little while. I do believe that the pre-production of his aborted Lord of the Rings films heavily influenced the look of Excalibur. The film was shot mostly in Ireland, and it is suitably green and lush. Boorman chose to put a fair bit of the budget into the plate armor that is worn by many of the knights. This was wise, as they make the production look much more expensive than it actually was. Mordred's lion armor is absolutely stunning. But in the end, this is actually a fairly low-budget movie. Proof that you do not need hundreds of millions of dollars to make something that can stand the test of time. What I also loved were these great spots of color he uses to punctuate things with this sort of ethereal flair. The sword Excalibur itself always has this fantastic green glow on it. At times Merlin and the knights have this great pop of blue light shining on them. This is great, great stuff. The interior of Camelot is filmed in small parts, making it appear bigger than it probably was. Boorman was not pleased with the look of Merlin's primordial lair, but I actually thought it was suitably mysterious and well worthy of the Great Wizard. And one of the things I always remembered about Excalibur in my mind's eye is that red sun coming up in the final battle. It is hauntingly beautiful, portending the end of Arthur's reign and the magical time of Camelot. Before its use became ubiquitous, Excalibur implemented Karl Orff's Carmina Burana to perfection. It was just the right time in the movie, when Arthur had received from Percival the secret of the Grail, that he and the land were one. Arthur rides forth one last time through a line of cherry blossom trees while the piece plays, and the cherry blossoms flow upon them like snow. It is a powerful scene, and one that even people who might barely remember the movie seem to immediately recall. Excalibur also makes great use of Wagner, specifically Siegfried's Funeral March, at the beginning and end of the film, as well as important spots in between. Composer Trevor Jones connects the dots and does a great job with the rest of the scoring in the movie. Much as Conan the Barbarian was lifted up by its soundtrack, so too was Excalibur. Now, as I touched on before, the acting in this movie is superb, almost legendary. The two leads, Nigel Terry as King Arthur and Nicole Williamson as Merlin, deliver the performances of their careers. And by the way, I'm not sure how true this is, but Klaus Kinski was originally considered for the role of Merlin. I cannot imagine how crazy different this film would have been if he had been cast. There is an alternate universe out there where that actually happened, and I'm not sure whether to be envious of or to pity those people. As for the rest of the cast, Nicholas Clay, who was taken from us far too soon, is at his absolute best as Lancelot. Sherry Lungi is a very apt Guinevere. One of the main supporting roles is manned by Gabriel Byrne. Long before he was trying to pierce the mystery of Kaiser Soze in The Usual Suspects, he was Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon. There's also, of course, Captain Picard himself, Patrick Stewart, as Guinevere's father, King Leondegrance of Camelyard. We get the prolific Kieran Hines in a blink and you'll miss it acting debut as King Lot. I bet a lot of you didn't even know he was in this film. And of course, there's the great Liam Neeson as Sir Gawain, in one of his very first movies too. Bonus points go out to Liam for bagging Helen Mirren during the production of Excalibur too. Nicely done, my man. And Helen Mirren indeed stars as the main villain in the movie, Arthur's half-sister, Morgana Le Fay. Legend has it that she and Nicole Williamson very much despised each other as a result of a prior relationship gone bad, and both had refused to ever work with each other again. But director John Boorman knew this, and he kind of knew that the off-screen, simmering tension between the two would probably result in magic when they faced off in the film. And boy, was he right. They are great opponents here, and they have a couple of really, really strong scenes together. And as a happy ending, the two actors actually ended up reconciling and becoming friends again by the end of the film. It's an embarrassment of riches. One that was probably part great casting eye and part pure luck of just catching every up-and-coming Irish actor before they hit it. The cast is really why this movie has stood the test of time. As I mentioned, Arthurian literary scholars often scoff at the movie because it tries to cram over 1,000 pages of Sir Thomas Malory's The Death of King Arthur into a 2-hour, 20-minute movie. No, you won't find side stories like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in Excalibur. For that, you can go to 1984's Sword of the Valiant with Miles O'Keefe. Not a terribly good movie, but enjoyable, if only for Sean Connery's performance as the Green Knight. You also won't find characters like Morgause inside Excalibur, the nebulous other sister of Arthur. Here she's sort of just melded into Morgana. The Lady of the Lake in literature, Nimue, is a scheming enchantress all on her own. Here she's only, as was once said of her,
Some watery tart, some moistened bin. Shut up, will you? Shut up!
Of course, there's hundreds of other stories you won't find in Excalibur either, but that's okay. The movie distills the Arthurian myth into its most important beats: love, loyalty, duty, betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption. They are all on full display. If you want more, absolutely go read Malory or all the other tales of King Arthur. But it's not practical to expect a 1981 movie to have the scope that you would find in the myths. Back then, believe it or not, any movie over 2 hours was sort of looked down upon. In the era we're in now, where 3-hour movies are sort of the norm, I really do wish we could return to the days of tight storytelling boiled down to their essence. And that is exactly what Excalibur is, a tight, disciplined story that is epic in scope. It is incredibly hard to do, but the great director John Boorman did just that. Salute, sir. So this is an RPG channel. So in RPG terms, a lot of you have experience with the Pendragon RPG from the legendary Greg Stafford. You can see a lot of that material behind me. I have run this game in the past, and it is well worth it for the right table, because it does go into a lot more detail. This is actually where you may have to tell fans of the movie Excalibur to kind of cool their jets just a little bit and actually embrace the more literary traditions of Arthur, especially if you're running the Boy King or the Great Pendragon campaign, as I believe it was renamed. This is a legendary campaign, by the way, well worth the money. Even if you just keep it around to read, it gives you like a year-by-year account of all the goings-on in King Arthur's reign. In D&D, a setting that is near and dear to my heart, Birthright, has a version of the ruler and the land's fate being intertwined. It's done in a more straight-up magical way rather than mystical, but you can still accomplish a lot of interesting adventures in Birthright. I've run a campaign for over 30 years in it, and I love it. Highly recommended if you can track it down. Lion and Dragon by RPG Pundit has rules in D&D 3.0 that would be perfectly adaptable for an alternate RPG set in King Arthur's Britain. And finally, venturing back into the realm of film, there's a companion movie I'm rather fond of, one that could easily be set in the, say, Anarchy period, maybe right before King Arthur. It is 1965's The Warlord, starring Charlton Heston. It involves a knight being sent to restore order in a village over in France at the behest of his king. Christianity runs up against pagan beliefs. Plenty of love, jealousy, and betrayal on display here, too. Plenty of RPG inspiration as well. So tell me, is Excalibur amongst your favorite genre movies? Like me, is it just amongst your favorite movies, period? Or did you not care for the film? Either way, I would love to hear what you have to say. I try to read every comment that I can, especially in the first day I release a video, and that's why it's very important If you're not already a subscriber to this channel, go ahead and subscribe, and then make sure just to get that one notification on if I release a new video, because I always love to hear from you guys, and there's a better chance I'm actually going to be able to hear from you if you comment on it, especially in that first day. All right, you guys take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we're going to talk soon. Peace.